What if I told you that there's an invisible algorithm running your life right now, determining whether you'll succeed or struggle, rise or remain stuck? And most people never even realize it exists. Today, we're diving into The Diary of a CEO by Steven Bartlett, the entrepreneur who built and sold companies worth hundreds of millions before turning 30, and who's decoded what he calls the 33 laws of success. This isn't your typical business book filled with feel-good platitudes. Bartlett has distilled the psychological source code behind human achievement into actionable laws that function like an operating system for your potential. So grab your headphones, settle in, and let's unlock the 33 laws that separate the successful from the stuck. Act 1. The Foundation Laws. Fill your 5 buckets in the right order. Imagine you're Elon Musk standing before skeptical investors, declaring you'll revolutionize both transportation and space travel simultaneously. Sounds delusional, right? Yet they believed him. They funded him. They followed him. Why? Because he had already filled his 5 invisible buckets in the precise order that creates unstoppable momentum. Every human being carries 5 buckets that determine their potential ceiling. Bucket 1. What you know. Bucket 2. What you can do. Bucket 3. Who you know. Bucket 4. What you have, your resources. Bucket 5. What the world thinks of you. Here's where most people commit professional suicide. They chase buckets 4 and 5 first. The money, the status symbols, the recognition. Steven learned this watching Richard, a brilliant employee who abandoned foundational learning for a high-paying CEO role. When the company inevitably collapsed, Richard had nowhere to fall back to. His empty knowledge and skill buckets left him stranded in career quicksand. During Steven's darkest hour of self-doubt, questioning whether his entrepreneurial focus was selfish compared to direct philanthropy, a wise monk named Radhanath Swami delivered a revelation that changed everything. You cannot pour from empty buckets. The mathematics of success are brutal but beautiful. Fill buckets 1 and 2 obsessively, and everything else follows naturally. These foundational buckets become your earthquake-proof foundation, the only assets that can never be stolen, confiscated, or destroyed by market crashes or industry disruption. To master it, you must create an obligation to teach it. At 14, Steven was paralyzed by stage fright. He froze on stage, humiliated by his own limitations. 10 years later, he was sharing platforms with Barack Obama, commanding audiences of thousands. What happened between those 2 moments reveals perhaps the most counterintuitive learning secret in human history. To master anything, you must create an obligation to teach it. This isn't about expertise. It's about transformation through vulnerability. Every single day, Steven committed to sharing one idea publicly, not because he was qualified, but because the act of teaching forced qualification upon him. The person who learns the most in any classroom is the teacher, he discovered. When your reputation depends on explaining something clearly, you don't just learn, you transmute knowledge into wisdom. This is the Feynman technique evolved for the digital age. Learn it, teach it to a child, share it publicly, review and refine based on feedback. The obligation creates accountability, accountability creates excellence, and excellence creates impact. You must never disagree. Steven's parents used to have explosive arguments. His father would disagree, escalate, then retreat into wounded silence. Steven learned this toxic pattern and replicated it in his own relationships until he discovered something that shattered everything he thought he knew about human psychology. Your brain literally shuts down when it detects disagreement. It's neurological self-defense. But when it senses agreement, something magical happens. It opens up, becomes receptive, even eager to absorb new information. Starting with "I disagree" is like performing brain surgery with a sledgehammer. But beginning with "I understand your point about X, and I see why you feel that way. However, I think it's worth exploring this other perspective," creates neural pathways for transformation. This isn't manipulation, it's neuroscience. You can't choose what you believe, but you can architect the conditions that allow others to choose new beliefs. The secret lies not in attacking old beliefs, but in providing irresistible new evidence wrapped in psychological safety. Act 2. The disruption laws. You must lean in to bizarre behavior. Remember the music store CEO who declared, "People love music," as his empire crumbled? He was leaning out while iTunes was leaning in. He chose familiar comfort over uncomfortable evolution. The most successful people do something that seems counterintuitive to the point of madness. They lean into bizarre behavior. When Tesla created insane and ludicrous driving modes, automotive experts called it ridiculous. When Steven installed a blue slide in his office, investors thought he'd lost his mind. When Brewdog put beer fridges in hotel showers, the industry scoffed. Yet these absurd decisions became their most powerful identity signals. Why? Because in a world drowning in sameness, absurdity cuts through the noise like a signal flare in the darkness. It communicates values more powerfully than any mission statement ever could. But embracing bizarre behavior requires you to make pressure your privilege, and that changes everything. You must make pressure your privilege. Billie Jean King decoded a secret that separates champions from casualties. Pressure is a privilege. It only comes to those that earn it. While most people flee from pressure like it's toxic, champions reframe it as evidence that they're engaged in something that matters. Steven learned this during what he calls cold nights on the side of Everest, moments when the weight of responsibility threatens to crush your spirit. But pressure isn't stress. Stress is internal. Pressure is external. And pressure can be transformed into rocket fuel if you know how to see it correctly, share it strategically, frame it powerfully, and use it purposefully. The secret? Understanding that meaningful pressure means you're climbing a mountain worth climbing. The discomfort isn't punishment, it's proof of elevation. You must outfail the competition. Thomas J. Watson, IBM's legendary architect, had a radical formula that defied conventional wisdom. If you want to increase your success rate, double your failure rate. This isn't motivational poetry, it's mathematical inevitability. Booking.com didn't dominate because they built perfect products. They conquered because they failed faster than their competition. While others deliberated, they experimented. While others perfected, they iterated. Their failure rate was 10 times higher than their closest competitor, and so was their success rate. Amazon's Jeff Bezos crystallizes this paradox. To invent, you have to experiment, and if you know in advance that it's going to work, it's not an experiment. Innovation isn't about genius, it's about intelligent failure at scale. You must become a Plan A thinker. In 1972, Nando Parado's plane crashed in the Andes Mountains. Surrounded by death, facing impossible odds, staring into the void of hopelessness, he made a choice that reveals the psychology of extraordinary achievement. He refused to consider Plan B. No backup plan, no safety net, no alternatives. For 10 days, he trekked through mountains that should have killed him. When rescue helicopters finally spotted the survivors, they found a man who had done the impossible, not despite having no Plan B, but because he had no Plan B. Research confirms this counterintuitive truth. People with backup plans perform worse than those who commit entirely to Plan A. The fear of failure that comes from having no alternatives actually fuels the creativity and determination needed for breakthrough success. The mathematics are stark. Unlimited commitment to Plan A generates resourcefulness that divided attention cannot match. Act 3. The psychology laws. Don't be an ostrich. The Titanic's passengers danced while their ship sank. They chose the comfort of denial over the discomfort of truth. Steven calls this the ostrich effect, burying your head in the sand when reality becomes uncomfortable. But here's the brutal mathematics of avoidance. When you refuse to accept an uncomfortable truth today, you're choosing an even more uncomfortable future tomorrow. Tiger Woods understood this when he completely rebuilt his golf swing at the peak of his career. Small misses now create big misses later, and he was willing to sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term mastery. The cure is a four-step reality protocol. Pause and acknowledge the discomfort. Review yourself honestly. Speak your truth courageously. Seek the truth relentlessly. Uncomfortable conversations aren't barriers to growth. They're gateways to it. Shoot your psychological moonshots first. Apple doesn't sell computers in their stores. They sell an experience of technological transcendence. Every product sits alone in pristine space, like art in a gallery. Tesla calls their plastic interiors vegan leather. Whoop removes time displays to avoid being categorized as just another smartwatch. These aren't deceptions. They're psychological moonshots that shape perception without changing reality. The most powerful example? The hairdresser's one last snip. After finishing a haircut, he'd inspect his work and pretend to make one final cut. It changed nothing about the haircut, but everything about the customer's perception of care and precision. Value doesn't exist in the physical realm. It's a perception shaped by expectations, context, and framing. The companies that understand this principle don't just compete, they operate in a different dimension entirely. You must sweat the small stuff. In 2023, The Diary of a CEO became the most downloaded podcast in the UK, surpassing even Joe Rogan on YouTube. Steven attributes this not to any single genius insight, but to sweating thousands of small details that others ignore. This is Kaizen, the Japanese philosophy of continuous improvement that transformed Toyota from an unknown manufacturer into a global powerhouse. They used it to transform GM's worst plant into the world's most productive facility in under 2 years. Not through revolutionary changes, but through millions of small improvements suggested by every employee at every level. The mathematics are stunning. 1% improvement daily for a year multiplies your value by 37. But 1% decline daily leaves you with nearly zero. Small things compound into extraordinary outcomes or catastrophic failures. There is no middle ground in the mathematics of momentum. Act 4. The leadership laws. You must be an inconsistent leader. Sir Alex Ferguson did something that shocked everyone who witnessed it. During Manchester United's greatest comeback, with victory hanging in the balance, he criticized his best-performing player at halftime. Patrice Evra was playing the game of his life, yet Ferguson challenged him to maintain maximum intensity. This reveals the ultimate leadership paradox. You must be brilliantly inconsistent, not chaotic but adaptive, not unpredictable but responsive to individual psychology. Ferguson knew that some players needed tough love, others needed encouragement. He tailored his approach to the individual while maintaining unwavering standards. Great leaders don't treat everyone the same. They give everyone what they need. They become human chameleons, shape-shifting to unlock each person's unique potential while never compromising the collective mission. The power of negative manifestation. Before launching what could have been a million-dollar mistake, Steven asked his team one uncomfortable question that changed everything. Why is this a bad idea? That single question saved his company. It revealed fatal flaws in their podcast network plan that optimism bias had hidden from view. This is the power of negative manifestation, systematically imagining failure to prevent it. The pre-mortem method works like psychological time travel. Imagine your project has failed spectacularly 1 year from now. Now brainstorm every possible reason why. This uncomfortable exercise reveals blind spots that positive thinking obscures like fog. Because here's what Steven learned from building and selling companies worth hundreds of millions. Your personal progression is always trapped behind an uncomfortable conversation. Your skills are worthless, but your context is valuable. Joshua Bell, one of the world's greatest violinists, performed in a Washington, D.C. subway station. Almost nobody stopped to listen. The same performance that commands thousands in concert halls earned pocket change underground. Your skills aren't worthless, but without the right context, they might as well be. Value is determined by what someone will pay, where it's needed, how rare it's perceived to be, and what impact it can create. Steven's friend transformed his graphic design income from £35,000 to projected millions by simply moving his services to Dubai's luxury market. Same skills, different context, exponential results. The skill remained constant, the value multiplied through intelligent positioning. Act 5. The Mastery Laws. The Discipline Equation. Steve Jobs said, "Remembering I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." This mortal awareness feeds into Steven's discipline equation, the mathematical formula for sustained achievement. Discipline equals value of the goal plus reward of the pursuit minus cost of the pursuit. When you truly grasp that your time is finite, that you have perhaps 30,000 days to make your mark, every choice becomes sacred. You stop betting your hours on meaningless activities and start investing them in compound interest returns of meaning. The discipline equation reveals why some people achieve extraordinary things while others drift. They've learned to increase the value and reward while decreasing the cost of pursuit. They've gamified their own growth. Ask who, not how. Richard Branson can barely read financial statements, yet he built a business empire worth billions. His secret? He asks, "Who can do this for me?" instead of, "How can I do this?" As Steve Jobs understood, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. Your ego insists you must do everything. Your potential insists you delegate everything. The choice determines whether you build something small and limited by your personal capacity or something vast and multiplied by collective genius. The mathematics are unforgiving. One person's limitations versus the combined intelligence of exceptional minds. There is no contest. Learning never ends. The moment you stop growing, you start dying. The moment you think you've mastered the game changes. The moment you stop asking uncomfortable questions, you stop finding uncomfortable truths that lead to comfortable futures. Success isn't a destination you reach. It's a discipline you practice daily. But here's the ultimate law that gives life to all others. Learning never ends. Let's look through the main laws from this book. Fill your 5 buckets in the right order. To master it, you must create an obligation to teach it. You must never disagree. You must lean in to bizarre behavior. You must make pressure your privilege. You must outfail the competition. You must become a Plan A thinker. Don't be an ostrich. Shoot your psychological moonshots first. You must sweat the small stuff. You must be an inconsistent leader. The power of negative manifestation. Your skills are worthless, but your context is valuable. The discipline equation. Death, time, and discipline. Ask who, not how. Learning never ends. Let's talk about next steps. Start by auditing your 5 buckets and identifying which foundational areas, knowledge and skills, need immediate attention. These are your only theft-proof assets. Create a daily teaching obligation by sharing one insight publicly each day, forcing yourself to learn deeply enough to explain clearly. Schedule one uncomfortable conversation you've been avoiding this week, using the agreement-first approach to navigate it successfully. Choose one absurd behavior that authentically represents your values and implement it immediately to differentiate yourself. Apply the pre-mortem technique to your biggest current project by imagining it failed and listing every possible reason why. Finally, calibrate your discipline equation by clarifying the true value and rewards of your goals while finding ways to reduce resistance.